Welcome to Betting with the Bag post-Christmas Day edition. It's Boxing Day, Thursday, December 26th. Hope you had a great Christmas. Hope Santa Claus treated you well. Hope Gambler Claus treated you well on the betting board as well for the last couple of days. Not that there was a ton in terms of the major sports out there. There was the Hawaii Bowl on Christmas Eve. You had the 5 NBA games yesterday on Christmas Day. Other than that, not a whole lot in terms of the major sports. But if you did make some wagering action, even through Christmas Eve and Christmas Day, hopefully it treated you well. I am here hosting for Jimmy one more day. Jimmy will be back tomorrow hosting Betting with the Bag. Today we've got a nice, usually when I'm hosting, most of the days that I've been hosting this show, we feel like we're rushed a little bit. We have a lot of games to break down and a lot of different sports. But today it is definitely more of a, we can take a breather. We can take our time with this type of board. We've got 2 college football bowl games. That's really your main event today, so to speak, your main attraction. We've got Louisiana Tech and Miami in the Walk-Ons Independence Bowl, and we have Pittsburgh taking on Eastern Michigan in the Quick Lane Bowl in Detroit. So looking forward to breaking those down. We'll spend pretty much the first 20 minutes of the show breaking those 2 games down. In particular, we have no NHL today. The NHL regular season does not resume from the Christmas break until tomorrow, so we won't be able to talk any hockey today on the card. And same thing with college basketball. There's no college basketball today. There's only 2 games tomorrow, and when I say 2 games tomorrow, I mean 2 games very loosely. We've got 2 very, very small-time games tomorrow in college basketball, and then a more full schedule gets going with that on Saturday. But we do have NBA today. Those are going to be the main headlines today. It's going to be the 2 bowl games as well as the 6 NBA games taking place here on Boxing Day, and we'll be sure to break those down as well. Washington, Detroit, Memphis, Oklahoma City, New York, Brooklyn, San Antonio, Dallas, Minnesota, Sacramento, and Portland, Utah, all taking place in the association today. So we'll welcome in everybody here in the chat as we get ready to break it down. Yes, exactly. The power is back on, Mitch. The lights are on. The lights are back here at Casa de Cameron. We're very thankful. Monday was a very, very frustrating day. It was a very aggravating day. The power outage didn't get solved until early evening on Monday. It was very, very frustrating. It was one of those situations where, you're constantly researching and you're trying to figure out how the hell has this happened and why is it going to be out for so long. It was an underground not an explosion, but something failed underground and causing the power outage in the area. And whenever you hear the word underground associated with a power outage, it's going to be a while. It's not going to be a 5-minute fix. It's probably not going to be even in an hour. Your lights will be back on. So it was a really, really frustrating day on Monday. But thankfully, that's in the past. We're back in action, ready to go here on a Thursday. One guest today on the show, Teddy Covers. He's here every morning on Betting with the Bag. He'll be joining me in 20 minutes at 11:25 a.m. Eastern Time. We'll talk both of today's bowl games. We'll look ahead to the weekend bowl games as well. See what Teddy's gotten involved with from a betting standpoint in the future bowl games that are coming up, and they're coming fast and furiously starting today. We're going to have bowl games pretty much any day that there's no NFL football, other than Sunday, where college football bowl games, obviously they take Sunday off. They're not competing with NFL, but other than that, you're going to have bowl games today, Friday, Saturday, Monday, next week, Tuesday, New Year's Eve, New Year's Day. There's 2 bowl games next Thursday, January 2nd, one on Friday, January 3rd, one on Saturday, January 4th, one on Monday, January the 6th. And then, of course, the national championship game, Monday, January 13th. So the next week to 10 days, it is going to become a bowl bonanza. So hopefully you guys are ready to go and ready to lock and load when it comes to college football bowl games over the next week to 10 days, because they're coming fast and furiously during that time. Let's get it rolling now with the two college football bowl games taking place today. One this afternoon, one tonight. We'll start with the Walk-Ons Independence Bowl. We've got the Miami Hurricanes taking on the Louisiana Tech Bulldogs. Louisiana Tech took a lot of the early money in this game. Miami opened about a 7.5 point favorite. Louisiana Tech ended up taking money, coming down to about 6.5. Even some sixes were the prevailing number for a while with Miami as a favorite in this game. So Louisiana Tech took a lot of money. We've seen some buyback the last day or two on Miami, back up to 7 here in this game. The total 49.5 in this one. And for the Miami Hurricanes, it's really a question of, from a in the trenches perspective. There's no question in terms of fundamentals and X's and O's and size and speed advantages in the trenches. That goes to Miami. But boy, oh boy. And you could even say this is a devalued number on Miami, but I don't know what else is in Miami's favor. I'm certainly not expecting them to be just absolutely thrilled and ecstatic and just with an incredible amount of excitement here that they're playing in the Independence Bowl. This is a Miami team that thought they'd be at least, an upper half of the ACC team this year. It's a team that thought they would, at least have an outside shot, maybe even contending in the ACC, and it was anything but for Manny Diaz. Very disappointing for his first season here as the head coach. Again, this team totally marred once again by quarterback consistency problems. Jaron Williams, N'Kosi Perry, definitely have had problems with turnovers. They've had the same issues that previous Miami quarterbacks have had the last couple of years. Accuracy problems, being able to step up in the pocket and make good throws down the field. There's no doubt Miami has had quarterback issues a long time. That's a concern. There's definitely a lot of Miami players sitting out this game. That's another thing you've got to be concerned about. And when you start to see that, there's a couple of games like that. Georgia Baylor. We're hearing a bunch of stuff about Georgia sitting a bunch of guys, in the Sugar Bowl coming up on New Year's Day. When you're starting to hear that, and you're starting to hear, that there's a lot of players that are probably going to be resting and not involved in this particular bowl game, you've got to be concerned about just how much the team is taking it seriously. How much is there really an incentive to win? Put your best foot forward. For Louisiana Tech, this is going to be different from the team that struggled down the stretch. There's no question. You look at this Louisiana Tech team down the stretch. Remember, they were dealing with suspensions late in the season here for Skip Holtz's team, including the quarterback, Jamar Smith. Remember, Jamar Smith did not play the final 2 games for Louisiana Tech down the stretch of this season. You could say, you're a little disappointed. You didn't really get to go anywhere. This is going to be in Shreveport, Louisiana, this game, so it's close to home. But you could also be maybe a little disappointed you didn't get to travel anywhere. You didn't get to go to a Florida or a California or some other place. But I think that's a minor thing. I still think this is a situation where for Skip Holtz's team and for Louisiana Tech, this is a team that I think should be excited when it comes to this bowl game here, playing a ACC power team like Miami, although they're power in name only, not so much performance this season. But, I would expect Louisiana Tech to be pretty fired up here for this game. We talked about how Miami's been just an absolutely dreadful team in terms of red zone offense as well, which is probably bad news here going against Louisiana Tech, because Louisiana Tech was a bend but don't break defense all season long. They would give up some yards, they would give up some plays, but boy, when it came time to keeping the ball out of the end zone, now granted, a lot of this was CUSA competition within their own conference, I get that, but they were very, very good red zone defense this year. Miami having trouble, finishing drives. So, here's the one thing that you have to remember, though, about this game with Miami and Louisiana Tech. The motivation alone tells you Louisiana Tech's the play here. However, we saw UCF and Marshall play out on Monday, and that was a game where I was buying into UCF being flat as a pancake. I was buying into UCF, coming off 2 years in a row where they're playing in the Fiesta Bowl and the Peach Bowl on New Year's Day against LSU and Auburn in those two games. How on earth are you going to get excited playing close to home? You didn't travel far. You're not going to some getaway destination. You're playing close to home. You're playing in the Gasparilla Bowl against the Marshall Thundering Herd. How is that not viewed as a big-time, we got to play this bowl game after 2 years of being in the Peach and Fiesta Bowl with LSU and all? It didn't matter, though. And why didn't it matter? Because, well, first of all, Marshall treated the football like a hand grenade, turned it over. And second of all, UCF had immense speed advantages. The speed that they had on the perimeter, Marshall just had no answers for it. The speed at receiver, was just blowing by the Marshall defenders. They were getting beaten over the top for one big play after another by that UCF offense. And Miami has the level of athlete, the level of recruit, the level of speed to make a team like Louisiana Tech pay for that and maybe cause similar problems to Louisiana Tech. But we're talking about a UCF offense that all season long was explosive, was able to make big plays. We're talking about a Miami offense that was not able to make big plays, that was not able to get players open downfield, that didn't have the quarterback play and the run game consistently, that was able to shred opposing defenses and make big plays. So you have to, again, separate those two games. Marshall, and you're pointing it out in the chat there. I saw someone, yes, David. Marshall was undisciplined. That's why they lost. There's no question. They were undisciplined. They were turning the ball over. You can't turn the ball over. You can't gift the opponent, 3 turnovers in the first quarter and expect to win that game? They ended up paying the price for that big time. So that's going to be the key here for Louisiana Tech to play a clean game here. I think they can. Let's not forget, though, Miami did play a Conference USA team late in the season. They played Florida International. They were a massive favorite in that game. They ended up losing that game in outright fashion. So Miami, you can say all you want, they should have speed advantages over this opponent, but, they lost to Florida International down the stretch of the season. 30 to 24. They were 21-point favorites in that game, 3 touchdowns. They lose that game outright, 30 to 24 against Florida International. They get beaten in their regular season finale by Duke, 27-17. And Duke was just way down from where they've been in years past. It was not a good year for David Cutcliffe's team. Their defense was shredded all season. Quentin Harris was a big disappointment as the quarterback as well for Duke. So, those are 2 ugly, horrible losses late in the season for this Miami Hurricanes team. There's big-time questions about their incentive here. Matchup situation aside, now that the number's back to 7, I was hoping it would get back to 7. I will have Louisiana Tech in pocket here, +7. I absolutely will. You look at Skip Holtz's recent bowl track record, pretty damn good with Louisiana Tech. 5-0 straight up, 4-1 against the spread. Last 5 bowl games for Skip Holtz here and Louisiana Tech, including 2-0 straight up in ATS the last 2 bowl games. They went to the Frisco Bowl against SMU 2 years ago. They destroyed SMU in that game, winning 51-10. Last year in the Hawaii Bowl against Hawaii, 31-14 victory against the Rainbow Warriors. So you talk about coaches that have a good bowl track record. That would be Skip Holtz. Louisiana Tech's been very, very good here in recent years in bowl games. So I'm going to go Louisiana Tech. I'm not huge bullish on this play, but at 7, I'm in on a Miami team that's flat out flunked this year. That's flat out been a disappointment. That an offense that an offense I don't trust laying a touchdown hardly to anybody right now. We're talking about a team that was upset as a 3-touchdown favorite against FIU. So I am going to be on Louisiana Tech here, +7. It's not a best bet material type play for me, but I am on Louisiana Tech +7. The one issue that I've got right now with La Tech a little, even though I'm going to back them here, is CUSA has not been very good. First of all, I don't think Conference USA was a great conference this year. And second of all, they've not been great in the bowl games so far. Marshall gets drilled. Charlotte gets drilled. It's been a little bit of a rough start here to the bowl season for Conference USA, and you have to wonder if they're going to be one of those conferences that ends up being a disaster area point spread wise for the entire bowl season. But I'm going to look past that. Miami was just absolutely Not good this year. Not good laying points. Questionable motivation. A couple of players sitting out here for this team. So I'm going to be on Louisiana Tech here in this game +7. I know someone in the chat, Rusty, saying it sounds like I'm the only one here that's on Miami. And Miami, if you're on Miami, you're hoping that you just dominate inside the trenches, and you do have that capability of doing so on paper against a Louisiana Tech. You do. But they're supposed to have those inside the trenches edges against Florida International, late in the season, and they ended up losing by 6, laying 3 touchdowns. So again, Louisiana Tech to me is going to be excited. They're getting there's some of their suspended guys back, including Jamar Smith, who's a very good quarterback who has played very well in the bowl game the last year as well for this team. Strength of schedule, certainly Louisiana Tech. Yeah, you could quibble with that. You look at Louisiana Tech's schedule. I'll bring it up right now. Texas. Is Texas their best opponent? Probably. Marshall, they lost that game by 20. And then at Texas, they lost that game by 31. So that's a viable point. Their 2 toughest games on the schedule for Louisiana Tech this year were Texas and Marshall, probably in their own conference. And they ended up losing those games 76-24. Pretty ugly for Louisiana Tech. But I remember that Texas game well, though. That was a game where it was a lot like UCF Marshall, that Louisiana Tech opener against Texas. They were in the game. They probably give Texas a real go in that game if they don't turn it over as much as they do. They fell into the same turnover problems that Marshall had on Monday against UCF. So, again, I understand strength of schedule, and definitely inside the trenches you have to give an edge to Miami. But to me, those are the only edges they have. I think motivation, I don't think they give 2 shits. If I were a Miami player, I wouldn't feel excited about this bowl game in particular, and Louisiana Tech. And not only that, I forgot to mention Skip Holtz in the underdog role. How good has Skip Holtz been as an underdog catching points over the years? He's been amazing. The underdog role has been great. So I expect Louisiana Tech to hang in this game. All right, let's get to the second bowl game. It's the Quick Lane Bowl. It's Pittsburgh and Eastern Michigan. We've got Pitt laying 13.5 in this game. 49.5 the total in this one. That's a lot of points to be laying with Pittsburgh, and when you start to really look at this game more and more, and you start to see what's going on with the situation coming in to this bowl, this Quick Lane Bowl, Pittsburgh had a solid season. I'm not going to say they had a great season, 7-5. Decent job. Their defense, very, very good. 31st in the country in terms of points per game allowed. Tremendous defense all season long. Certainly could pose problems for Eastern Michigan's offense. However, Eastern Michigan offensively came on big time late in the season. I think Eastern Michigan had their best offensive performances of the season down the stretch. I mean, you look at the last 3 games. They hung 42 on Akron, 45 on Northern Illinois. Northern Illinois can play a little bit of defense, and Eastern Michigan put up 45 points against them, and then they scored 26 against Kent State as well. You look at their non-conference results. They went to Illinois. They won that game outright as an underdog, 34-31. Against Kentucky, 38-17 loss, but Kentucky needed a late touchdown in that game to get the point spread cover against Eastern Michigan. So, there have been glimpses that Eastern Michigan have been able to at least compete somewhat with some solid Power 5 conference teams this year. You got to love Eastern Michigan in the underdog role. I mean, the underdog role for Eastern Michigan's been great. They've been one of those teams this year for the most part, definitely last year, where if you bet the underdog in an Eastern Michigan game, whether it's the Eagles or whether it's their opponent, you're going to win more times than you lose. They've been very, very good in that role. And when you look at Pittsburgh here, how excited are you to be playing in the Quick Lane Bowl? Seriously. If you're Pitt, you're going to Detroit. You're not going to Florida. You're not going down south. You're not going to California. You're not going to Hawaii. You're not going to a warm weather place. You're going to the Quick Lane Bowl, a sterile environment at Ford Field. The place is barely going to have 400, 500 people in it, honestly. And they have had this bowl game for years now. It used to be the Motor City Bowl. Now it's the Quick Lane Bowl. how excited are you if you're Pitt, really, to be playing in this bowl game? I'm not so sure in this one. Eastern Michigan, you know, Mike Glass, the quarterback, really played a lot better down the stretch. 22 touchdowns, 3,200 yards of offense. I think the key for Eastern Michigan is, are they going to at least be able to run the football here today in this game? That's going to be the big question mark here against Pitt. We know Pitt's defense, especially up front, stout in the trenches. I think Pitt defensively, I'm looking at it right now, their run defense, extremely good. 107 rushing yards per game, 2.9 yards per carry allowed. So a very, very good run defense, no question, for this Pitt Panthers team. However, when you look at Eastern Michigan offensively, they're definitely a team that skewed a little bit more to the pass than the run, especially later in the season. Eastern Michigan, they only ran 125 yards per game, 3.9 rushing yards per game offensively. Whereas you look at their passing numbers with Mike Glass, and Mike Glass is one of those quarterbacks that really did get better later in the season. You saw this Eastern Michigan offense get better, 280 yards through the air per game, 8.1 yards per pass play. And that is the weaker side of the Pitt defense. It's their secondary. Their secondary can be gashed through the air. You've got a situation where Eastern Michigan's offense improved, and you talk about teams that are now in a price range where Pitt is, nearly a 2-touchdown favorite, a team that I personally don't trust this team to win by big margins on a routine basis. Kenny Pickett was better this year. I'll give him that. Definitely was better, I think, as a quarterback this year than he was last year. Pretty solid performance from him throughout the course of the season. I thought he took at least a little bit of a step forward in the passing game, but he is still, to me, the epitome of a run-of-the-mill, pedestrian, average quarterback in college football. He is. If they're going to win this game by 2 touchdowns or more, he's going to have to make plays throwing the football. Not saying he can't, because again, you're not playing ACC defenses. You are playing Eastern Michigan, but to me, there's enough red flags here with Pitt. The questionable location of this game. Is it really going to excite the Pitt Panthers? Is Kenny Pickett in the passing game going to do enough here to be able to cover a number of this size? For a Pitt Panthers team do you know how many games they've won by 13 or more this year? That many. None. 0. They haven't won any games by that margin this year. Pitt. 10 points was their biggest margin. You go back and look at that Pittsburgh Panthers schedule this year. Pittsburgh's largest victory was by 10. Twice. They beat a team by 10 points twice. Georgia Tech, who was just beyond bad this year, completely rebuilding. Paul Johnson out, Jeff Collins in. You've got the triple option out, a brand new offensive scheme in. Players that were recruited initially for the triple option, playing on offense for in a new system for Georgia Tech, a complete misfit. That was the one Pitt win by 10 points or more. The other was Ohio in MAC play. Their other wins, they beat UCF by 1. They beat Delaware, FCS Delaware by 3. They beat Duke by 3. They beat Syracuse by 7. They beat North Carolina by 7. It's not a win by a big margin Pitt team. This is not. Absolutely not, in my opinion. And for as much as I was reluctant and hesitant before the bowl season, to back MAC teams, MAC is 2-1, straight up in ATS in the bowl games so far. Buffalo won and covered. Kent State won and covered. Central Michigan is the only team that didn't get it done from a straight up or ATS standpoint so far here in bowl games. But to me, this is a dubious, questionable, suspect point spread range for me, with a Pitt team that's got questionable excitement level in my mind to be playing in Detroit, Michigan, here in a quick lane bowl in an environment where there's barely going to be 1,000, 2,000 people in the place. Whereas Eastern Michigan, close to home, I think now both of these coaches, by the way, I believe are looking for their first bowl wins as well. Pat Narduzzi hasn't won a bowl game yet for Pitt. That's another thing that worries me. Look at this bowl track record here for Narduzzi. It's not been good. You look at last year in the Sun Bowl against Stanford. They lose 34-13. 3 years ago They didn't get to a bowl game 2 years ago. 3 years ago, they were in the Pinstripe Bowl against Northwestern. They lose 31-24. So the recent Pat Narduzzi Bowl track record, not good. The Pitt program, 1-6 straight up, 2-5 ATS their last 7 bowl games, 0-3 straight up in ATS their last 3 bowl games as a favorite. I talked about this when we did a DJ Big Boss and we did a video on this bowl game, and I said if I'm betting this game, and I did bet this game, I'd be looking at Eastern Michigan plus the points, and that's exactly where I am going now, especially at plus 13. Your one concern is that again, just like the Miami La Tech game, trench advantage for the favorite. There's no question. Can they just line up the football, run it down Eastern Michigan's throat? There's always that potential. There's that potential for Pitt to do that against Eastern Michigan. There's that potential for Miami to do that against Louisiana Tech. But these are favorites that have pedestrian offenses, suspect excitement level and motivation, and teams and coaches I don't trust in this kind of point spread range in either of these 2 bowl games. So for me, it's a dog-eat-dog world in the bowl games today for me. I mentioned Louisiana Tech plus 7 in the first game, and I mentioned Eastern Michigan here. You can get 13.5 at Heritage, 13 in most other books right now. Again, make sure you're using SBRodds.com every single day for the best line of information available. I mean, you should be using SBRodds.com every day because it'll give you the best line, best price you can possibly get. If you can save a few cents on a money line, if you can save a half point when it comes to a point spread or a total, SBRodds.com helps you with that. So make sure you're using that. So for me, I'm on Eastern Michigan here, plus 13. This is not a Pitt bowl track record I trust. This is not a Pitt win by margin team that I trust. Again, they haven't won a game by more than 10 points this entire football season. So I'm going to go with the Eastern Michigan side at this double-digit underdog price. I believe we have Teddy ready to go, I'm being told. So he is ready. He is standing by, fresh off Christmas Day in the Savransky house. I've got to mention this to Teddy as we bring him aboard here on Boxing Day. Teddy, you got to answer this for me. Over, under, number of gifts for Isaac yesterday in the Teddy Covers household. I'm going to set the number at 6.5. Do we go over or under that number, Teddy, with Isaac? How many gifts did you guys give him yesterday for Christmas? We can't hear Teddy. Hold on. All right, we'll get Teddy reconnected in just a second here, but we'll get him on board with these with the Thursday show here. So just give us 1 second with that. Ben, let's get some questions from the chat here. Number is moving for a reason. All right, here we go. Ben Sports 24/7. Eastern Michigan will win this game. They could. I certainly think they'll compete in this game. I don't want to get carried away here, but definitely thinking that Eastern Michigan will hang around in that one. Yeah, the under. I didn't really love either total in this game. Pitt's not a team I'm anxious and excited ever betting their games over the total. So to me, it's not really a total I'm involved in at all. 49 and that. But obviously, it's going to be at Ford Field, so weather's not going to be an issue. It's going to be a fast track. Certainly, that's something you want to keep in mind when you're looking at the total at this time of year. Weather environment. If it's an indoor-outdoor environment, it's going to be indoors, obviously, for the Quick Lane Bowl between Pitt and Eastern Michigan. But still, these are two teams that don't exactly play fast. These are two teams that don't mind running the football, especially Pittsburgh. And again, Pittsburgh's not a team that I really rush to bet over. So if I had to throw out a lean in terms of the total in that game, it would be toward Pitt, Eastern Michigan under 49. But I'm staying away from the total in both games. Same with Louisiana Tech, Miami. Louisiana Tech's offense is good enough that I don't want to bet under at 49 and a half. I feel better about the under in the Pitt game than I do the under in the Miami, Louisiana Tech game, even for all the problems that Miami's offense had most of the season, and it was immense. The number of issues they had in terms of being able to finish off drives, the quarterback play, as we mentioned, didn't seem to matter again. Who Manny Diaz turned to at the quarterback spot, definitely certainly an issue with them offensively this season. So we'll see if we can reconnect with Teddy Covers here, get him on the line. But until then, let's see. All right.
Check. Can
Just
you hear me? Check.
I hear him doing a mic check.
Check. All right. I took out my one
Teddy.
mic and I'm on my other mic. So can you guys hear me okay?
I hear you good, Teddy.
Okay.
Looks like you're having the day I had on Monday when the power went kaboom for me. Yeah.
Oh, I remember. I got to do an impromptu fill-in for you, but it went fine, dude. Power, what are you going to do? The power went out. So it was
an
all
underground
good,
situation. And it was an underground
I'm glad to
situation.
have you today, though.
Yeah, it was an underground situation. So once I heard that there was an underground problem causing the hydro outage in my area, I knew it wasn't going to be a quick fix. And sure enough, 8-9 hours later, the power finally comes back. But it's on now. The lights are on. We're back in action. Teddy, I was just saying to you before we brought you on as the guest today, I set the over-under 6.5 number of gifts for Isaac on Christmas morning. Am I pretty close?
No, you're under, dude. I'm no Christian. We didn't do anything for Christmas. Jewish Christmas, man. Movie and Chinese food.
There you go. Happy Hanukkah. There you go, right?
Yeah. Under 6.5 for the limit.
Oh, man. Yeah, see, I said a bad line there, big time. Hope you enjoyed it, though, Teddy, yesterday. Definitely was nice to have that day back, spending time with family and relatives. It's good to be able to do that, take a break every now and then, because you know as well as I do, from September to April, there's not a whole lot of breathing time and ability to just take a breath and catch your breath doing this on a daily basis. But let's get right to it. We've got 2 bowl games today, Teddy. Miami, Louisiana Tech in the Walk-Ons Independence Bowl. Pitt, Eastern Michigan in the Quick Lane Bowl. I'll throw both bowl games at you simultaneously, and then we'll get to the NBA card for this Thursday. But what's your thoughts on these 2 bowl games here today taking place?
So I didn't play either one. I really wasn't that close to playing either one. So it wasn't like the numbers came out and I'm like, all right, they are what they are. I heard you make a strong case for Eastern Michigan. I don't disagree with the concept of Eastern Michigan against Pitt today. I really don't. All that said, the fact that Narduzzi hasn't won a bowl game, Pitt, to me, appeared to be interested in this one. Their fan base isn't. Pitt didn't sell 1,000 tickets for this game. With the quotes coming out of the locker room where they're interested. And this is a team that Pitt can beat. I watched Eastern play 3 or 4 times this year. They're not very good. I remember the Kentucky game. They couldn't move the football. And, they hung around for a little while in that game. A couple of big plays. They couldn't move the ball in that game. There were a good handful of other games where Eastern Michigan, they're a ham and egger team. You know what I mean? In theory, they're supposed to match up really well with Pitt. I can't picture Eastern Michigan doing anything on offense in this game. I can't picture them moving the football. I don't see a scenario for Eastern to get in the 20s, in the 30s, the 14, 17 for the Eagles. And my math guys tell me that the over is the way to look in this game. And I don't want any part of the over because I don't trust Eastern to score. I think Pitt can run the football and win and cover, potentially. Again, whether they have the impetus to do it in a completely empty Ford Field is another question entirely. But don't think for a minute that because Ypsilanti is 45 minutes from Detroit, that Eastern's going to fill the place. Eastern doesn't have a fan base. If every fan they have shows up, they'll get 15,000. And I'll take the under on every fan showing up for the Eagles. So it's a clear pass for me. And I didn't want to lay with Pitt, but I don't think Eastern is capable of hanging around with this team necessarily for 60 minutes. I wouldn't be surprised at some point if Pitt wears them down.
And Miami, Louisiana Tech, I was saying to myself, that is this going to be UCF Marshall maybe part 2? Because that's the only thing I could see in terms of Miami, me personally trusting Miami. We know they had the same quarterback, inconsistency and issues. We do know Skip Holtz and the Louisiana Tech team has been good in the bowl games. Skip Holtz has had a good bowl track record the last few years. There's no question about that. But you do worry a little bit about speed and trench advantages here for Miami. But is their offense good enough to take advantage of that? That's the big question. I mean, UCF being able to take advantage of their edges in those areas against Marshall is different from Miami, because we know I think there's a big gap in offensive aptitude from UCF and Miami. But, I just think that for a Miami team that scuffled and sputtered and been a major disappointment all year, and I'm hearing quotes from Manny Diaz saying it's time to look ahead to 2020. I know that's not the kind of quote and team I'm looking to lay a touchdown with. What would be your lean, if any, with the Miami La Tech game?
I honestly think this is, if I had to make a bet on Pitt, Eastern Michigan, I could find a way to make a bet on Pitt or on I don't know what I'd do in that game, but probably Pitt. This game, from the time I saw the opening line and the money coming on La Tech, I'm like, I'm not playing this game. I'm not. Miami's A game beats Louisiana Tech's A game by multiple touchdowns. Okay, if the Hurricanes show up on any level, if they make a couple of plays, and this is one of those games where momentum's going to mean everything. All right, if La Tech comes out and punches them in the face, Miami might well lose the game. This is going to be a much better game for in-game betting than it is, in my mind, for pre-game betting. And in-game, you can see if Miami's showing up or not. But if Miami shows up, they're going to win, and they're going to win and cover. They're more than a touchdown better than Louisiana Tech. And if Miami doesn't show up, Louisiana Tech's going to win the game straight up. They could win it by a couple of touchdowns. So this is one where you might want to watch it early and get involved. But pre-kickoff, I'm doing absolutely nothing with this one, not even close. Because the disparity between, and again, if you bet Miami all year, you know exactly what I'm talking about. Very random team. When they show up, they can kill anybody, or just about anyone. And when they don't show up, they can lose to just about anyone. And in a bowl like this, I'm not convinced they're going to show. At the same time, they get an early, you brought up the Marshall UCF game. That game turned in the first quarter because Marshall turned the ball over 3 times. And when you have a dead team or a team that may not have any momentum or any enthusiasm going to the game, and you throw a pick 6 on your first drive, and all of a sudden the crowd's cheering and the sidelines pumped, your entire handicap of this team not being into the game changes completely because the other team just gave them a whole boatload of momentum. So if Miami comes in and turns the ball over right away, or La Tech does and turns, and here's Miami rolling from the get-go, your pregame handicap is shot. So you have to be aware that there is a class difference here, size and speed. Okay, so and a class difference that's bigger than we normally see for in this point spread range. I'm not playing it. So all of that discussion, and it's a game I'm not. Like I said, I'm not even close to being involved with. Not side, not total. I'll leave this one alone.
All right, quickly, we'll get to NBA next, the Thursday NBA card in just a second. This is my one last time hosting this week, so I'll go over quickly. We'll go through Friday and Saturday, at least, in the college football bowls. I'm on the North Carolina side in the Military Bowl. It's just straight and simple for me. Rod Carey doesn't get it done in bowl games, period. Brutal track record. Now, I know all of that was Northern Illinois. This is now Temple, but brutal. And not just bad, not just losing straight up in ATS, but blown out, non-competitive in most of these bowl losses for Rod Carey. That's a dubious track record. North Carolina had to fight down the stretch to get into a game. I think North Carolina finds a way to get that game by a touchdown or more. Texas A&M, I like that side laying less than a touchdown against Oklahoma State. Think about A&M's 5 losses this year. This could be the best set of 5 quality losses you'll ever see in college football for a very long time. Your losses are coming against Auburn, Alabama, LSU, Georgia, and Clemson. Those are the 5 teams A&M's lost to. Oklahoma State's got injuries on offense. Still unsure of who's going to be quarterback. I know Sanders was practicing. There's a chance he's going to be back for this game and not be the quarterback instead of Drew Brown. I don't think it matters all that much. I think there's a defensive discrepancy between these two teams as well. So I do like the A&M side as well. And USC, Iowa have gone back and forth. I liked USC initially. I don't know if I love them as much now after doing some more work on that game. And I do like the over the total and the nightcap, Washington State Air Force. It's Washington State's air raid attack against a team that's got a suspect pass defense in Air Force. They always have. And then on the flip side, you got the Air Force triple option. I know in theory, Washington State, extra time to prepare is supposed to help them against the triple option, but I think they got some size issues in the trenches defensively along that D-line, and Air Force will be able to run that football right down their throat. So I think it's 2 offenses that are best at what the 2 defenses really can't stop all that effectively. So I think that game goes over. Teddy, we got the 5 bowl games on Friday. Brief, quick hitter thoughts of those 5 games.
Sure. I'm on the other side of the Temple, North Carolina game with you than you are. I took some Temple plus. I also took some over in that game, and I think the over might be the stronger of the two plays. When the Owls have faced speed on offense, the defense hasn't been quite as good. Although Temple's red zone defense, that's tough. It's been a real good red zone defense all year, and that's my biggest concern about this game. But I got side and total, and the two plays don't necessarily correlate, and yet I still like them both. The Tar Heels haven't won games by margin all year. They're not a great defensive team by any stretch of the imagination. And Temple's this little ham and egger team that just keeps, you talk about a coach's track record at a different school. The MAC as a whole has had miserable bowl seasons. It'd be one thing if the MAC had been having great bowl seasons and Northern Illinois has been the outlier. But the MAC as a conference has been overvalued in recent years prior to this season. And I'm willing to write off at least some of Carey's track record in that regard. So Temple and over in play there for me. I bet Sparty. Michigan State, I bet that right on the opener at 3. That was now 3.5, and the 4s, 3.5, 4. I wouldn't talk you out of Michigan State. Michigan State's the better of these two teams by a pretty wide margin. And the Big Ten as a conference was so tough this year. And we'll see. I mean, obviously, I think the cold weather benefits Michigan State. I think their defense is capable of keeping Wake from lighting up the scoreboard, and I think Sparty has a chance to score here. So I like, and again, the system is you take the team with the very worst point spread record of any bowl team. You bet on them in the bowl, and that's 22-9 the last 31 years. And Sparty falls into that system this year. Again, it's an easy blind way to find perceived value at this time of year. I think Michigan State plus. Oklahoma State A&M. I understand the concept of laying with A&M, but Okie State's a little bit like Miami in terms of they were very random all year, and they were bad favorites and good underdogs. And I'm not necessarily looking to fade the Cowboys here. If I had to play at free bet, I look at the Aggies, no question. But I'm not playing that game. I'm not playing USC Iowa either. I would love USC against an undisciplined team. Iowa is the opposite of what USC wants to see in this ballgame. And that Iowa doesn't beat themselves, and USC oftentimes needs teams to beat themselves. Trojans have more talent. And total of 52 is interesting in that contest because Iowa doesn't play 52s. Iowa plays 40s. So we'll see how that plays out. But there is some correlation there between USC and over. I didn't play the game at all. Washington State and Air Force. Let me start with this. When you take the air raid offense and give it a couple weeks off, it doesn't always come back in the same rhythm, and that worries me here about the Washington State side. I do not bet against service academies in bowl games. All right. It's Navy or Air Force or nothing in those games. When you're talking about a 70% track record over a significant, a 30-year sample size, you have to pay attention to that. So I will not fade. However much you want to make a case for Washington State, I will not step in front of the Air Force or Navy because, they show up. They show up. And I worry about the Cougs offense. Look, it was a disappointing season for Washington State. A lot of things didn't go right. I'm not convinced that everything breaks right in their bowl game either. It'd be Air Force bad. And total, it's easy to picture a scenario where both these offenses move all day. And the markets are moving over. I don't blame them for moving over. But when we're talking about Air Force games, we're talking about games with limited possessions. All right, not going to be 14, 15 possessions for these teams in this game. Air Force wants to run. And if they break off big plays, then it'll be a shorter, more possession game. But the style of the Air Force offense is grind out first downs, put the ball in the end zone, keep the opposing offense off the field. That's a bad recipe for overs in this point spread range. And given my concerns about that air raid offense following the extra time off, and I'm worried about Washington State being a little bit out of sync after not playing for the last month, I'm not playing the over. So late game would be Air Force or nothing for me. So we're not. We have some disagreements here, Ian. That's a interesting discussion.
That's good. We can't always be on the same side, or else there'll be no betting market. That's the way you got to look at it. Washington State, the last four. I went back and looked at it because your point about them, the time off, the layoff, hurting the air raid offense. I went back and looked. 20 points in the bowl game in 2015 against Miami, the Sun Bowl. 12 points in the Holiday Bowl against Minnesota in 2016. 17 points against Michigan State in the Holiday Bowl in 2017. And then last year in the Alamo Bowl against Iowa State, 28 points. So that was their biggest output. And I remember that game. They didn't really get going until the second half. Offensively, that game, Washington State. So there is a little truth to that, Teddy, what you said, that theory that that time off from the regular season to the bowl game sometimes makes for a little bit of a not so sharp, not so fluid, not so crisp Washington State air raid offense under Mike Leach. So we'll have to see if that continues. Yeah, go ahead.
And you can look week ones for the Cougs have been terrible week one ATS. And they're always playing some, FBS team, and they're laying 40 points, and they either barely win or lose the game straight up. Off a bye, they haven't been great. I mean, it's not just the bowl games. And again, they played better defense in some of those games than the one they'll see here. But that is a rhythm offense. When they get in rhythm, they're bet on every week. And when they get out of rhythm, I don't look to back Mike Leach and Washington State. And this is a game that I want no part of the Cougars.
All right, quickly on Saturday. Obviously, we've got two early bowl games on Saturday, and then, of course, the two playoff games. I actually have stronger opinions, I think, on the two early bowl games than I do the playoff games, to be honest. I took Iowa State +3, and I just take Matt Campbell, and the underdog role always interests me with that football team. Notre Dame and Brian Kelly's track record in bowl games has been a little bit spotty, and Matt Campbell I trust. You look at so many of their losses this year, close losses, a bunch of them by small margins. I'm not sure, considering where Notre Dame was early in the season, that they're going to be just chomping at the bit for this game. So I like Iowa State there. I was initially looking Memphis, but, the Mike Norvell's departure, new coordinator, he took everybody with him too. So, you got guys that are not used to calling plays for the Memphis Tigers that are now going to be calling plays in this bowl game here against Penn State. That's no longer a situation that I think I like Memphis in. So that's a game that's gone from maybe getting involved to a pass on the Memphis side. I still am interested a little bit in the total because I don't believe in Memphis defense. I think Penn State's offense, after playing some pretty decent squads, decent defenses at least, or decent or better in the Big Ten, they're going to be able to move the ball here against Memphis here. Question is, can Memphis and Brady White and that offense, even with Mike Norvell's departure, the coordinator's departure, still be able to put up points of their own? So I am still considering the over in that game, but I'm off the Memphis side. I'm not going to be on the Tigers now, just with all that coaching turnover that they've had. Oklahoma LSU, I can only bet it over with those two offenses, but at 76, I don't love the number. And Clemson, Ohio State, I ain't fading Dabo, not with what he's done the last few years in these big time games. All he's done is put the pedal to the metal. Ohio State, don't get me wrong, and Justin Fields, will he be 100% mobility, 100% health? Remember, he was banged up a little bit in the Big Ten championship game against Wisconsin. And remember, Ohio State had to fight back from the death there in that game after a slow start to win it. They did take over and dominate the second half, but they struggled early in that game. I know there's questions about how good the ACC was this year, top to bottom, and the Big Ten, you could say top to bottom, the better conference, stronger conference this year. But at the price range that you get in Clemson there, 2.5, I just don't have the stones to go against him in a big playoff setting like this. So I am looking at Clemson in that game. So those are my thoughts on Saturday's bowls, Teddy. How about you with the 4 games on Saturday?
Yeah, there's only one move that I'm even close to making on Saturday. I'm not doing anything with Iowa State and Notre Dame. If I was going to play it, I would look at the Cyclone side. But I guess I lean Iowa State. But I'm not going to get to the window there. Notre Dame is that good. There's nothing we can say bad about Notre Dame this year. They're not a team. There's a buy on Iowa State. There's no sell on Notre Dame, in my opinion. Certainly not in this point spread range. Memphis Penn State is not a game that piqued my interest from a wagering standpoint. I'm not sold on laying a touchdown with the Nittany Lions away from home against a Memphis team that can match them speed wise. But I haven't gotten a sense of what Memphis team is going to show up. Memphis brings their A game. They can hang. They can win. I'm not convinced that that's going to be the case, as you mentioned, with the coaching staff gone, with new play callers. That's an issue, clearly, for the Tigers. So it's a game I'll leave alone. LSU, Oklahoma, and I'm with you. When the bookmakers and the markets do their job right, they're going to price you out of games that you want to play. And this is a game. I would only want LSU. I don't want to lay 2 touchdowns with them. I'd only want over. I don't want to get over 76. So it's an easy pass. I will, however, be getting involved in the nightcap. And it has everything to do with the last point you were talking about when it came to Clemson. Give me the best team Clemson beat this year. Go.
The best team Clemson. I'd look. Their schedule it's well done. A&M in non-conference.
Sure, they beat. Their best win was against a 5-loss team, and we talked about the 5 losses. But the Aggies weren't good enough to hang in any of those games or win any of those games. That's Clemson's best win. And oh, by the way, that was a dogfight. All right. They were way overpriced in that game. Everyone's looking at the Virginia game like that's meaningful. Virginia the previous week, absolutely, pardon my expression, they shot their load against Virginia Tech. There was nothing against Clemson. All right. So Clemson hasn't faced anybody who can hang with them. And when after week, face someone that can hang with you, you get, it doesn't prepare you when someone can hang with you. And Ohio State can hang with anybody. Okay. The quarterback's 85%. I'll take the over. I think the Buckeyes are live. I think the Buckeyes win the game. And of course, Dabo's track record ensures that Clemson's the chalk here. That's an incredible track record. Okay. That's all in the past. We don't have a track record like this from Day. We will. I like the Buckeyes. In fact, I'll take your action on that one, Ian. Me and you. Personal bet. Dinner next time I see you.
That's fine. And it will be. There will be a time. I'm due to return to Las Vegas. It will be happening, I think, probably at some point in 2020. So there's no question about that. So we're on different sides there. Again, Clemson, if it's Clemson laying more than a field goal, I could see. Personally, I would get scared a little bit of betting on them laying more than they are now. But in a straight-up win situation like that, it's very difficult for me to go against that team, and I'm not going to until further notice. So we're on different sides. Teddy liking Ohio State as the small underdog, and I like Clemson as the small favorite there, laying 2.5. All right. So that's the bowl action. We'll move on now to NBA. We have 6 NBA games taking place here on Boxing Day night. We're going to start, as always, in rotation order. Washington Wizards, Detroit Pistons. We've got Detroit laying 7 in this game, 229 the total. We know Washington has had their issues. They've just a miserable defensive team. Scott Brooks just doesn't have a team that competes on the defensive end of the court good enough, often enough, and a team that's so reliant on Bradley Beal for them offensively, and the results are sometimes pretty ugly for Washington. How do you think they stand tonight against Detroit?
So did you see who the Wizards signed? They signed Gary Payton Jr., the kid out of Oregon State. His dad's certainly more famous, and he's a Hall of Famer. And Gary Payton Jr. was an undrafted kid out of Oregon State. That said, see what he did in his first game? He played great, just like you expect to. And he played defense. And he had 6 steals, 5 assists, 10 rebounds, 10 points. I mean, that's his first game. And after the game, Scott Brooks was like, geez, where'd this guy come from? So that mitigates a lot of my concerns about Isaiah Thomas being out for Washington. Now, they're still banged up in the front court. They're not going to have Thomas Bryant tonight. Bertans is out, obviously. Wagner's out. Wagner is out, I should say. But I'll start this. The Pistons, you can't lay points with the Pistons, dude. I can't lay points with the Pistons. All right. You want to talk about a disappointing start? And a team that's looked lifeless it doesn't matter how much talent Detroit has. All right, Blake Griffin and Andre Drummond, great. Derrick Rose coming off the, pride and a spark. The role players are there. Detroit has been an underachiever from day one this season. I'm not laying points to them. So it's Wizards or pass in that ballgame for me.
All right, Wizards are pass. So it's, yeah, pick your poison. Washington trusting them at all, and Detroit maybe even less trustworthy, laying 7 points in that one. Memphis, Oklahoma City. We've got OKC laying 6, 225 the total. So just me, Teddy, or are we seeing signs of life the last week or two from Memphis? So what's your take on this game?
Well, yeah, until their last game, they gave up a buck 45 to the Spurs and allowed 67% shooting in that game. We'll talk about that in a minute. We talk about Spurs and Mavericks. But here's your trivia question for today. How many point spreads has Oklahoma City covered in this point spread, in this range all year? When they're laying, let's say, more than 5. Give you a hint. Goose egg. If they cover tonight, it'll be the first. And Okie State showing signs of life, too. Memphis is a bottom feeder playing hard. And you love teams like that in the NBA. Teams that are being priced like they're bottom of the barrel squads, and the effort comes every night. And the Grizzlies have more talent than I think people give them necessarily credit for. And they're coming off a really bad game, and OKC hasn't covered numbers like this all year. We saw the road teams dominate yesterday, Christmas Day NBA. I guess all this is my way of saying Memphis or pass for this better.
All right, Memphis or pass for Teddy in that one with the Grizzlies and the Thunder. We've got New York and Brooklyn. They're trying to build this into a rivalry, but I think the Knicks have to actually become good before that happens. Brooklyn -8, 224 the total. I will say this. There has been an uptick in whatever you want to call it, urgency, attention to detail, enthusiasm for the Knicks in the short term after David Fizdale gets canned and Mike Miller takes over in the interim. We have seen a little bit of a step-up effort from the Knicks on more than one occasion. Can they step up here, getting a big number like this, +8 against Brooklyn? I know Brooklyn's a little bit flighty in this price range. What's your take on this one?
Oh, yeah, this one I put in my pocket. The Knicks plus. And it's a no-brainer in my mind. Knicks coming off 3 straight losses. The first 2 came against good teams. The third one, all the quotes are, man, we didn't show up. That's as bad an effort as we had all year. This is stupid. We weren't ready, da-da-da-da. So we really got some Knicks quotes beating themselves up a little bit, which is what I want. This has been a rivalry. 2 games this season have both been decided by 4 or less, tight, down to the wire affairs. No reason to expect anything different this time around. And the Knicks in general have played better basketball under Miller than they did under Fizdale. And the Nets most assuredly aren't the type of team that we want to be laying prices with. Brooklyn's another squad, where you look in this point spread range, you say, all right, how many of these games are the Nets covering? Few and far between. So, yeah, Knicks plus the points, to me was an absolute no-brainer. And it is a rivalry. Although it's been a one-sided rivalry, it's most assuredly still a rivalry between these. The Knicks get up for facing the Nets, and the Nets get up for facing a Knicks, and that's what a rivalry means. Even though the Knicks have been bottom feeders for the better part of the last 2 decades. Knicks plus the points in my pocket.
All right, like a New York +8. That's an official play, by the way, for Teddy. New York +8 against Brooklyn. Battle of Texas. Next up, San Antonio and Dallas. We've got Dallas 6.5-point home favorites, total 226.5. Obviously, Luka Doncic remaining out for this team. Is it as simple as saying, well, this is Dallas's first game since that unbelievable collapse on Sunday afternoon against the Toronto Raptors, and I was going back and forth between NFL football and that Mavericks Raptors game on Sunday. I actually turned it off when they fell behind 28. I'm like, oh, don't have to go back, keep changing the channel back to that game again. It's over. No, it was not. The Dallas Mavericks or the Toronto Raptors, depending on which side of the coin you sit, it's either an incredible Dallas collapse in the fourth quarter or an unbelievable comeback win for a very short-handed Toronto Raptors team, a Raptors team that even fought the good fight the very next night against Indiana before losing in overtime. And I think finally yesterday in that early Christmas Day matinee against Boston, they ran out of gas. They just hit the wall, and the Celtics ran them out after those 2 incredible, intense games for the Raptors. They finally ran out of steam yesterday against Boston. Is it as simple now, Teddy, as saying, well, Dallas off that hideous loss, that brutal collapse, one of the worst you'll see, to just lay the points in bounce back mode? Or is there some reluctancy on your part to want to lay it with Dallas tonight? What's your take here?
Oh, there's extreme reluctance to lay it with Dallas because Luka's coming back tonight. And anytime you take a team and you're putting your point guard in and out of the lineup, first game back, I'm never laying points with you. And I understand. The Spurs are coming off a 67% shooting effort Okay, San Antonio's not going to have many games like that this year. And in general, I have no problems fading a team off a night where literally everything was falling for everyone. Incredible shooting up from the Spurs in that ball game. So you can understand the fate of San Antonio. You can understand the support of Dallas. I'm not backing the team with the point guard coming back right there and laying a price with them, especially because, you want to talk about a buy-sign team. San Antonio, were they 6-18-1 against the spread their first 25? They'll do better than that in their next 25. I got some buy signs on the Spurs right now that are real. And if I'm going to play a San Antonio game, it'll be on the Spurs, not against them. All that said, the price looks very reasonable, doesn't it, with Dallas? But again, Luka back on the floor. He's been upgraded to Pro Bowl, and the quotes that I saw this morning from Carlisle said that he expected him to play tonight. So maybe when he gets announced as in, this line may go up. It's already gone up from 5.5 to 6.5. If you like the Mavs, I bet it's sooner rather than later.
Yeah, and speaking to the team to the north here, all you have to do is look back to how the Raptors played when Kyle Lowry first came back a few weeks ago, and the disruption in chemistry and cohesion that brought to the basketball team. Remember winning all those games shorthanded with the likes of Rondé Hollis-Jefferson and Terrence Davis and Chris Boucher and all these bench guys stepping up for the Raptors. And then you think, oh, here's Kyle Lowry back. Look out now. And they struggle and lose, I believe, the first two games with him back. So that's a great point about, especially the point guard coming back. Cohesion and chemistry can be disrupted in that scenario. It happened with Toronto. Will it happen to Dallas tonight? That's Teddy's main concern here with laying 6.5 here with the Mavericks against the San Antonio team that this is always a good way to think in the NBA. Compartmentalize the season, break it down into segments. Yeah, San Antonio was a brutal ATS team the first month or two of the season. Doesn't mean they're going to be a brutal ATS team the next month or two. Teddy thinks there might be some value in the upcoming weeks with Coach Pop and the San Antonio Spurs. Minnesota, Sacramento. We've got Sacramento 4.5, 5 at home as favorites. Total 221.5, 222. Teddy, thoughts on T-Wolves Kings?
So we talked about Oklahoma City a minute ago, and the Thunder being a team that has a grand total of 0 point spread covers this year when they're laying 5 or more. Sacramento's in the same boat. Okay, 0 point spread covers for the Sacramento Kings in this point spread range. They haven't been in as many times as OKC, but this hasn't been Sacramento's role. Interesting quote from Luke Walton saying that, all right, hey, another team, they got their point guard back there, and Fox comes back and they start losing. It's been one of the worst stretches of the season for the Kings over the course of the last week or two. They have not played good ball. Walton's quote, we want to play faster. All right, we got Bagley back. We have Fox back. We need to up our pace. We also need to play defense. Well, they don't play a whole lot of defense necessarily. Minnesota doesn't play a whole lot of defense. Now we're hearing Karl Anthony Towns trade rumors. Minnesota's in a world of hurt. This is the kind of game against the kind of team they can snap this losing skid against. I know I won't lay with the Kings. Certainly lean towards the over in this one. Two teams that have pushed pace and are talking about pushing pace. And the over, if I'm going to play this game, I can't get there with the dog. I would look at the over before I looked at the underdog. But I know that I won't get there with the favorite. This is not Sacramento's price point.
All right, not going to get there with the favorite. Lean to the over for Teddy with Minnesota, Sacramento. And the nightcap, Portland, Utah. Utah, 5.5-point home favorites, total 219. We talked about some college football bowl teams that were kind of erratic and hard to predict game in, game out. Surprisingly, that's been Utah at times this year, game in and game out. It's been a weird up and down season so far for Quinn Snyder's group. We know Portland's been a little bit better of late. What's your take here, Trailblazers Jazz?
So I'm not sure what's going to happen with Jordan Clarkson tonight for Utah. They just picked him up from Cleveland in a trade, and I thought it was potentially be a great deal. Clarkson's someone who can really help the Utah Jazz. How much playing time does he get? How much does he get at the point tonight? I don't know, and that's a concern for me very much. And Portland's another team that underachieved early, when you go look through the Western Conference standings, and you're like, okay, playoff team, playoff team, playoff team, playoff team, and you see the Blazers way down there, and you're like, no, Portland's a playoff team when all's said and done. At least I think they are. They've obviously had more than their fair share of injuries, but they will get healthy as the season progresses. Whiteside has been he's impressed me for the Blazers, and it hasn't been every game, but he's someone who can bang with Gobert in the low post. I guess I have a slight lean here towards Portland plus the points before I want to lay with Utah tonight, but it's not anything I'm close to getting the winner with. I'm going to see. I'm going to read more and see what they want to do with Clarkson in the lineup and see how much playing time he's going to get, because that's a negative game one. It might be a positive 5 games from now. It's a negative game one for Utah. So I'm not inclined to lay here with the Jazz. It'd be Blazers or pass, but nothing that I'm close to getting the window with.
All right, so not even close to a wager there, just a slight lean to Portland. That's the NBA card for today. Teddy will be ending the show a little earlier than normal, so we'll go about another 10, 15 minutes or so max, and all of that's going to be NFL. Week 17. I'm looking forward to breaking this down because there's so much to talk about. There's so many moving parts, who's playing, who's not, for teams that don't need the game, what's motivation, what's the incentive for so many teams going into this weekend. We know obviously teams like Tennessee taking boatloads of money, teams like Pittsburgh taking boatloads of money because they need the win. People just gravitate to the must win. And like I always say, this is my favorite theory across all sports, and I want to drill it home to everybody watching here. Remember this statement: must win does not equal will win, and does not always equal will cover. Just remember that. You know how many instances I've seen in a Week 17 team needs the game and they cough up the lung to the team that doesn't? The team that doesn't actually plays with a bit more fire in their belly than maybe you thought going into it. And next thing you know, you got a losing ticket and you got to rip it up. I've seen that happen many times. I'm just saying, do not always just gravitate and knee-jerk to the team that's got to win the football game. I would assume, Teddy, you agree with that, don't you?
So our dear departed friend Dave Malinsky shared with me a story one time about Week 17, and it was everyone involved in the Billy Walters group, and this is Week 17, 2013. Kansas City Chiefs against the, at the time, San Diego Chargers. The Chiefs had just clinched their playoff spot. They were resting everyone. The Chargers needed to win to get their playoff spot. And the line opened in the range of 4.5, 5.5, 6.5. Got bet up 9.5, 10.5, 11.5. Got bet up. And this is BW's group. This is Billy Walters' group who's betting this again and again and again. 14, 13.5, 4, closes 15.5. All right. Legit 10-point line move for a Week 17 game. One team's resting everyone. The other team must win. And you know how that game went. The team that was resting everyone led by 10 after 3 quarters. The team that must win rallied from behind and won in overtime by a field goal. And the minus 15.5 was never in play. This is typical in Week 17. Be aware. And a lot of the stuff is already priced in. That was the whole deal when Malinsky and I were talking about that game. He's like, the fact that it was 4.5 to 6.5 at the opener, depending on the book, it was already priced in at that number. And then the bettors came in and said, oh, let's price it in 10 more points. The openers they're not sleeping on the openers. And you talked about Tennessee, Houston. Tennessee got bet up to 6, open pick, Titans money to 6, and now back down to 3.5 for Houston because the Texans aren't necessarily going to be laying down in this one, according to Bill O'Brien. And so, it's not. And one other thing I have to share about Week 17, of all the weeks of this season, this is not a week where I pepper the board with wagers. If I find 2 or 3 good plays for Week 17, I am happy as pie, because this weekend there's a lot of crapshoot games. There's a lot of games that you just don't know, and they're easy games to pass. I'm sure we're going to break down the card here. There'll be lots of games I'm like, I don't know, pass. I'm not looking for 15 games. I'm not looking for 10. I'm not looking for 5. I want a handful of good plays. There may be a couple this weekend. Let's see what we can do.
Yeah, absolutely. Tennessee, Houston, I'm probably not getting involved there. Again, you're paying a premium, in my opinion, with some of these must-win teams. Although you were paying, as Teddy alluded to, a much bigger premium earlier in the week with Tennessee when they were laying 6. It's gone back down to 3.5 in recent games. I see this Cleveland-Cincinnati game hovering 2.5, 3. I'm really looking at Cincinnati here. I really am. I mean, they've clinched first overall. You have to be impressed with the fight from the Bengals, even last week against Miami. And that crap, it's the overtime that nobody wanted to see, but we all got to see. The Bengals and the Dolphins last week. But there was fight, from Andy Dalton and that Bengals team. And you look at Cleveland, another disheartening, interception-filled loss for Baker Mayfield. The defense has totally fallen apart and collapsed without Myles Garrett. You trace back the Cleveland defensive struggles the last few weeks, goes all the way back to when Myles Garrett was suspended in that first meeting against Pittsburgh. After that game, that's when this defense has looked like a shell of what they were earlier this season. There's 2 Ohio teams. I only want one in that game. It would be Cincinnati or nothing. What's your take on that one, Teddy?
With you 100%. If I'm playing, I only want the home dog. That being said, do I really want a 1-win team in Week 17 in a game where they probably have to win to cover the point spread? So the lean is Cincinnati. I don't expect to get to the window there.
Yeah, Chicago, Minnesota. We'll blast through. Anything for you? It's not a game I don't think I'll be involved with, but what about Chicago, Minnesota for you, Teddy?
So it really is interesting. I know I don't want the Bears. All right. So the question is, the Vikings already locked into the 6th seed. The markets have devalued the Vikings as a result. I want to get a sense of what Zimmer wants from this game. And I know there's some guys from Minnesota is going to sit. The Vikings played badly last week. They need this game in a real way. And I would only look at the Minnesota side of this game. And if they're interested, this game is very cheap. But the Vikings are absolutely on the short list.
All right, Vikings on the short list as a lean right now. Indy, Jacksonville. Certainly I don't want the Jags. There is no denying that whatsoever. I don't know how the hell they stole the game against Oakland. And then Oakland, who you think is dead going into the Charger game after that brutal loss in their home finale, they end up beating the crap out of the Chargers. So go figure. It's one of those go figure results in the NFL. Indy's taking all the money here, and I can totally see why. We did see them show up big time and with a good effort last week against Carolina, although a lot of that was a bad Carolina team. But it's not like there's a big difference, bad Carolina from pretty bad Jacksonville right now. So I would probably agree with the line move. I'm not sure I'd want to lay 4 right now at the current number, but I don't want the underdog. What's your thoughts there, Teddy?
100%. Colts are pass. Jacksonville's dead, and Indy is not. And Indy's talked about like being at 500 being a legitimate goal for them. And we say, does that really matter? For a team like the Colts, it might. And, you talk about the Jags versus the Panthers. I'm sure they had 2 punt return touchdowns last week and everything goes right. And this week might be a whole different story. But I've got the Jags power rated lower than the Panthers. So Indy or pass for me.
All right, Atlanta, Tampa Bay. If I could trust Jameis Winston to find the players with the same colored jersey more often than the other team, I might like Tampa a little bit here. 47.5. This total's getting hammered down a little bit. Look, let's be honest, even with the injuries to Evans and Godwin, that passing game still worked as long as he wasn't throwing interceptions last week against Houston. But there were some good throws and times when that offense was marching up and down the field against Houston. I think they can march here against Atlanta. Tampa Bay's defense stinks. We're seeing that. They're getting gashed weekly. Happened again last week against Houston. So not much on the side for me, but this total is getting bet down to the point where I am interested in the over. Finally, there was an under last week with Tampa Bay, who've been one of the strongest over teams in the NFL this year. A lot of that, though, was, the interception issues. I believe there was some heavier winds in that game as well that impacted the passing game a little bit. 47.5. I'm getting more and more interested in the over in this game personally. How about you, Teddy? Thoughts on Falcons Bucks?
Well, I mean, Atlanta went under last week as well. Stayed way under in that ball game. So I don't have a strong feel for this game. I really don't. The chance that Godwin could be back for Tampa, which certainly helps your over significantly, I think, we talk about one of their best playmakers. And I agree. I mean, the Bucs have been the epitome of an over team, where their offense is chucking the football around all over the place. And the defense, they've done a heck of a job against the run. but they can't stop the pass. And I don't think that changes here. And, we think about what Matt Ryan's capable of doing in this ballgame against that defense and Jameis on the other side. I certainly wouldn't talk you out of an over in this game. I'm curious as to why the under money's coming in. And until I know why it is coming in, I don't want to get involved fading it. You know what I mean? Lean that way. Wouldn't talk you out of it. Sidewise, I got no opinion here at all. My number says it's very short. That Tampa should be more than a field goal here. And it might be. It'd be, Bucks, but nothing strong.
All right, yeah, it's like where there's smoke, there's fire type of thinking there from you in terms of why is this thing taking so much under money? There could be something to such a big move. We're talking 3 points down. That total's gone. Washington, Dallas, of course, you'll hear now. Now, Dallas needs not only to win, but obviously they need some big-time help from the New York Giants. They need to beat Philadelphia. That's the only path for Dallas to get the NFC East crown and a playoff spot in the NFC. How about this? Dallas, this is one of those times where the must-win team is actually getting bet against significantly. I mean, Dallas was as high as 13-14, down to 11, 12, 45.5 the total, and I can't say I disagree. Dallas out of sorts. Washington is still, fighting, battling. They're not good. They're battling. Maybe battling's all they need to hang inside this big-time number. What's your take, Washington, Dallas?
Yeah, I mean, I disagree with your take on the line move here. This has been sitting on 10.5, 11 all week. There were a couple books that priced it higher initially, but for here in Vegas, at least, it's been, 10.5, 11, 11.5, and it's still pretty much in that range right now, 10.5, 11, just about everywhere. So it's not like there's been this a huge market move towards the skins. Just the books that were off market have now back in line with the market with money on Washington. Now, the Redskins have played competitive football down the stretch. And if you watch Washington, they've probably played at least a field goal above their power rating number for the better part of the last month. I've been impressed with Callahan. I've been impressed with the feel of the offense, how they know they have an identity that they didn't have before. This is a run-first football team. The quarterback play has been decent. I don't know if it's going to be Keenum or Haskins this week. From a power rating standpoint, there's zero difference between the two. A month ago, there was.
By the way, Keenum.
Now
it will be Keenum. Yep.
Well, okay, that's okay. But from a power rating standpoint, in my mind, there's no difference. And it probably should be Keenum. I would, you don't want to put Haskins back out there less than 100%. But again, you have the must-win team being priced like a must-win team. We have a dog that all they want to do is knock off their foe. They're capable of doing it. That the Redskins have fought hard. I don't think there's double. Let's put it this way. I cannot possibly lay doubles with Dallas in this game. So it's Redskins or pass a priori. And Washington's a team that I absolutely considering getting in the betting window with.
Yeah, my analysis on this next one is going to be brief. New Orleans, Carolina. It's New Orleans or nothing, but the number's skyrocketing, at least going up a little, as you can tell, up to 13, 45.5, 46. I mean, for New Orleans, there's something to play for, and I know it's not must win, but there's something to play for. Carolina looks shot. It looks too easy to lay 13 with New Orleans. That's why I'm a little cautious, but I don't want the dog here. How about you, Teddy? Saints, Panthers.
Yeah, I'm not close to getting involved in this. I'm not going to lay close to 2 touchdowns with New Orleans on the road in a game they'll be happy to win by any margin. Carolina is right there with Jacksonville at the bottom of the league, and a team that all they want is their season to be over. I'm interested to see how the Panthers respond after Greg Olsen called everybody out last week. So I'm fascinated by this game, just as whether Carolina shows. And if Carolina shows, they can hang. And it's not like the Saints have been killing everyone this year. They've just won every single close game all year, which is impressive. But I can't lay it. And I don't trust the dog to hang. They might, but I don't trust them to do it. Pass.
The Eagles control their own destiny. Win and they're in. But something tells me they're not going to have an easy go of it here with the New York Giants. They're laying 4.5 on the road here, 45 the total. I appreciate the guts and the heart and the passion and everything this Eagles team has had on display with all the injuries, especially on the offensive side of the football. Lane Johnson, multiple receivers, multiple running backs. injured for this team down the stretch, even defensively at times, and yet they've fought, they've hung in there. Their will has been unbelievable. But you're coming off a huge win against Dallas, and you're going to have to go on the road against a Giants team that, let's not forget, just a few short weeks ago on Monday Night Football, Eagles life and death to beat the Giants at home in overtime. Yeah, I know Philly must win. I'm not laying 4.5 with Philly. What about you, Teddy?
No, not a chance. Am I laying 4.5 with Philly? The Eagles, back the Eagles the last 3 weeks is fine. Yeah, back them this week. Now they're must win. And this line is cheap for a reason. All right. And the Giants with Daniel Jones are better than the Giants with Eli Manning. Let's not forget that. The Giants have a little momentum, and all the Giants want to do is spoil Philly's plan. So this game has the makings of a battle. And again, the Eagles' offense isn't good enough to exploit the Giants' defensive weaknesses. Under, but when you look at Philly's defense away from home, these are a night and day dichotomy between what they do away from home and what they've done in Philadelphia this year, which is not going to let me get to the window with the under in this game, especially after what the Giants did last week. But it's not a game I'm going to play. If I had to play it, I can only look at the dog. And frankly, if I'm going to play the dog, I'm going to play the dog on the money line. Would you be shocked if the Eagles and Cowboys both lost on Sunday? I wouldn't.
Yeah, and Eagles will still get in. Yeah. It would not shock me. That would not shock me one bit. Not with these two teams. That's why they're in the position they're in right now. Neither one has been able to really put their foot on the throat of the other team and take control of this division, seize control. So to answer your question, could I see both of these teams losing outright as favorites this Sunday? Hell yeah. Absolutely, I could. Speaking of teams I could see losing outright as favorites, how about Pittsburgh? 37.5 the total. Look, I know Baltimore is going to rest Lamar, Ingram. There's tons of guys that they're going to rest, at least several key players anyway. But Pittsburgh's offense looks shot. I mean, you look at Duck Hodges. He was throwing ducks. It was a duck throwing ducks last week against the New York Jets. I didn't like seeing that one bit. The offense looks really, really limited. Very, very pedestrian at best right now. Hodges seems to be struggling more and more, and that was against the Jets. Now you got to go on the road, face Baltimore. I know it's everything this game for Pittsburgh. I get that. But you're not going to see me laying points on the road here with Pittsburgh, even if they do need this game. I don't like what I'm seeing from their offense. And I know RG3 is going to start for Baltimore, and you talk about a career that sort of went off the rails for him. But in a backup role, can he come in there for one game and be decent? Maybe. We'll have to wait. I know Pittsburgh's defense has been awesome, but I don't know. This Pittsburgh offense is not a team I'm looking to lay points with on the road, even if they do need the game. Teddy, how about you, Steelers and Ravens?
Okay, so let me start with this. My powering number on the game is Baltimore, with everyone healthy, is Baltimore minus 14. All right, I got 5 Ravens that are missing. Wow. Lamar Jackson to RG3. How much is that worth? Touchdown? More? What do you say, Ian?
Maybe. I would say I would go 9-10 even, but I would go 9-10 point adjustment personally because Lamar's been that good. But Robert Griffin III is not, I don't think, totally inept in this spot in this game. He can come in there and I think be decent, especially because Baltimore's been such a run-heavy offense this year.
Yeah, I mean, if you're giving Lamar Jackson 10 points, and okay, let's give him 10 points between Jackson and RG3, which I think is too high. But even with that, now, Brandon Williams on the defensive tackle is out. Marshall Yanda on the offensive line is out. Earl Thomas is out. Mark Ingram is out. How much you make those 4 injuries worth? Or those 4 absences worth? If you're going to give 10 for Lamar, how much you make those 4 worth in tandem?
1.5, 2.
Sure. So my powering number is 14. We gave Lamar 10. We'll give him 2 more for the other guys being out. My line says that Baltimore should still be favored -2. And again, the Ravens aren't resting everybody. All right. It's not all our starters are sitting, or, we don't care about this game. Baltimore cares about this game. Enough said. I'm on the Ravens.
They should. No, they should. And because think about it this way. You can't rest everybody this week if you're the Ravens and you're John Harbaugh. Because think about it. You're not playing next week in the wild card round. Then you're finally going to play in the division round. Do you really want 2 Sundays in a row where not a single key starter is playing and on the field? You then
Nope.
have to worry a little bit about that cohesion and that rhythm going into that divisional playoff that divisional playoff game in 2 weeks from now. So I think it's the absolute right move. That I know you're trying to be delicate with Lamar, and it makes perfect sense. That's a guy you cannot afford to get injured at any point. So it makes sense that he's sitting Lamar Jackson in this game, no question. You're the likely MVP of the league this year, but I agree with at least getting some of your guys in there, getting some of your starters in there if you're John Harbaugh, considering you've got the bye. You don't want to be going in there with 2 weeks with these guys, not even taking a snap in a game situation. So I agree with what he's doing, Teddy, here. I really do.
Yeah. And I apologize, Ian. I didn't realize I was going to be on for the full show today. I've got another show that starts in 5 minutes, so we got to pop through the back the back end of these games.
All right, we'll go quick, rapid fire. I'll throw Jets, Buffalo, Miami, New England, Green Bay, Detroit, Chargers, Kansas City at you. All 4 of those. What do you think?
Well, let's see. Jets, Buffalo is the ultimate meaningless game, and the Bills will rest a bunch of teams because again they don't have the 2 weeks off. They'll be playing again next week. I really don't know what to do with that game. It's one that the under money's come in, and I wouldn't argue with that. Patriots, Dolphins. If I'm playing, I'm laying. New England's approaching this with intensity, and it's certainly, Miami, a heck of a game last week. Fun game last week. They got their win. They had their feel-good moment. I'm not anticipating Week 17 in Foxborough to be a feel-good moment for the Miami Dolphins. So that's New England or pass for me. And again, the Patriots, another team that they still have something to show in Week 17, and they've talked about it. They got still something to clinch in Week 17, and they've talked about it. There's, the quote was, "We're treating this like a playoff game." And how much real that is or not, I don't know. But I'm not stepping in front of New England. New England or pass. For me, Green Bay, Detroit. I don't want to lay this price with the Packers. I don't want to take I want no part of the Lions. That's a dead team walking right here, and the price isn't right. It's similar to the game we talked about earlier with New Orleans and Carolina, where the team's got to win and there's intensity there, but I'm not convinced. The number's just too high for me to get involved, and it is. For that one, Chargers, KC. Yeah, we're seeing the Chiefs money coming now. I'm not surprised. Chargers are a hard team for me to get to the window with at this stage of the campaign. Right. Just about everything has gone wrong, could go wrong for LA. And, the markets are on KC. I wouldn't argue with that at all.
All right, final minute or two. Here we go. We'll blast through the last 3. Oakland, Denver, Arizona, Rams, San Fran, Seattle. I probably am sitting out the Sunday night game, even though it should be a great game to see. We'll have to see if Seattle turning back the clock, bringing in Robert Turbin and Marshawn Lynch pays off for them to take the place of Carson and Procise, the 2 injured running backs. I will be on Arizona 100%. In this game, this Sunday, regardless of whether Kyler Murray or Brett Hundley's at quarterback, it doesn't matter to me. Rams were in the Super Bowl last year. They're out now. I don't see them laying points against Arizona. I don't trust them in this spot. I will be on Arizona regardless of who's suiting up for the Cardinals. And Oakland, Denver, I'm leaning over the total. Drew Lock and the Broncos offenses looked solid. And Derek Carr played like last week like a guy fighting for a starting job in Oakland. Like he knows that, hey, they're thinking of maybe moving on, looking elsewhere. He brought a little something last week against the Chargers, so maybe you see points there. Teddy, thoughts on those last 3? Rams, Seattle, Denver.
So I can understand the desire to fade the Rams. No argument with that whatsoever. I don't want them with Hundley. Hundley's a big drop off, and I know he made some plays last week against the Seahawks defense that didn't show. I don't want to. If it's Murray, I'm with you. If it's Hundley, I'm not with you. So let's see how that plays out. My hunch is it's going to be Hundley. I think it's silly for them to try to rush Murray back for a Week 17 game, but we don't know that yet. San Fran, Seattle, boy, the price isn't right, and now with 3.5s out there with the 49ers. But the Seahawks defense is an injury-riddled mess right now, and I do think San Fran is the better of the 2 teams. But I'm not going to lay a price on them on the road in this matchup. No way. So I expect to pass on that one. And at 3.5, I can only look at the Seattle side, to be perfectly honest. Maybe lean under in that ball game. And then, Oakland, Denver. Good game. This should be a good game. The Broncos Broncos have been fighting. I'll give Drew Lock all the credit in the world. And again, first-year coach, and they bought into Fangio by and large. I mean, I have no real interest in stepping in front of Denver. And I watched the Raiders lose to Jacksonville, and then I watched them beat the Chargers, and it just came down to execution. One game they couldn't execute in the red zone. The next game they could. Some of them, they really didn't execute well against the Jags. They didn't bring it. Maybe it was the emotion of the last home game, and they just didn't have a good game. They certainly had a good one last week. Carr's getting a lot of blame for the Raiders' struggles, and when you look at Oakland's receiving core, it might be the weakest receiving core in the NFL. It really might be. So it's not an easy game for me, and not one I'm going to get involved with. Lean under if I do anything, but again, at 41, 40 and a half, that's a little bit low for me to get involved. So probably not a game I'm going to play.
All right, great stuff.
My strongest opinions, the whole Minnesota and Baltimore. That's the two. And again, I've made 0 bets in the NFL, but I'll have bets made before tomorrow's show.
All right, great stuff. So lean in Minnesota and Baltimore right now. Teddy, awesome work. We blasted through a ton of different sports. We're out of time, obviously. You're out of time as well. Teddy, thanks for joining me on this Thursday morning. It's always fun when I get to fill in and chat with you. Have a great Thursday. Good luck. I'm
glad your power stayed on, Ian. It made for a much easier show. Yes. Last time I was trying to go myself, and I didn't have any access to the chat, so it was just brutal. But I appreciate for everyone to sticking with me during that. And, we do the best we can. It's always live, my friend, and that makes for fun on-the-fly discussion. So cheers, Ian. Merry Christmas. All the best, everyone, and we'll be back in tomorrow.
All right, great stuff. There he is, Teddy Covers. That'll wrap up our edition of Betting with the Bag for Thursday, December 26th. Thanks to everyone in the chat for tuning in and joining us on this Thursday. Again, a lighter card than normal on a Thursday with NHL and college basketball. No action today. NHL will be back tomorrow, but Jimmy will be back as well tomorrow on Friday morning on this show, hosting it. So make sure you tune in for the Friday edition with Jimmy the Bag back in the house, hosting Betting with the Bag tomorrow morning. Great stuff. Thanks to everyone in the chat for your tuning in, for joining us, for your interaction. Always great. Again, the show will be back tomorrow, 11 a.m. Eastern, with Jimmy the Bag hosting back in the house and back in action. Thanks to everyone for tuning in. I'm Ian Cameron. Have a great Thursday. Good luck with all of your wagers. Hope everyone had a great Christmas. And as always, guys, leche and los bookmakers.